He came home early, dripping rain on the porch, and stopped cold because his son was asleep in my arms, humming, and breath and peace a thing that had never happened in that house, not for doctors, not for therapists, not even for him, you know what I mean. That impossible moment that makes a room hold its breath. I didn't say much, just kept the lullaby my grandma taught me. The one with no words, only rhythm, while Mr. Moore watched from the door and said low and even, "You're not allowed to touch him," and I said. He touched me first, because that's the truth. Bryce came to me, rabbit clutched in one hand, laid his head on my sweater, and picked the beat. I was tapping on his back, 1-2, 1-2, as if his body finally found a place where the world didn't scrape. By morning, he'd replayed the hallway camera 3 times, the part where Bryce steps off the whale rug and folds himself into my lap, like he's done it 1,000 times, and I could see something cracking in the man's armor, not anger, not even jealousy, more like grief moving out a fraction, to let wonder in. Yeah, that happened. His mother Eleanor carries a voice like a courtroom, pearls and posture and rules. She took one look at me and said, "The line women like me hear in houses like theirs. We are not the family that lets the help cross boundaries," and he said quietly. He smiled last night, which landed like a verdict spoon frozen over her tea. We kept it small because small is how healing shows up. Oatmeal at the counter, where the light is kind me taking a bite first, so he'd copy the rhythm instead of the taste. Blocks on the rug, triangles tapping 3 beats, a star traced slow, while I hummed the same 2 bars until the room softened, and Mr. Moore stood in the doorway like a man learning a language he'd been too busy to hear. Patterns calm him. I told him you've been trying to change the pattern, and he gave me that look. Rich men give you, when you talk to them like they're human, half insulted, half relieved. "Do you always say things like that?" "Only when I'm afraid," I said, "and I'm not afraid of you." The noise outside found us anyway, because gossip smells hope and wants to eat it. A groundskeeper sold a blurry photo of me and Bryce walking to the feeder headline, tried to wedge itself between us, the widower, the maid, the boy scandal on a hill, and the board at his company, asked the kind of questions people ask when they've never tucked a child through a meltdown, all perception and liability, and never once the word love. So he stood in a room of suits and said, "She stays, he's improving. If that troubles you, say it to my face." Then came home, put a velvet box in my hand, and said, "Your own key, your own entrance, not like help, like you're safe here," which is a sentence you don't forget, even when you're too careful to use the key. I knew the storm would come to the gate. It always does, a guy with a camera and cheap bravado. "Are you sleeping with your boss? Is this a paid arrangement? Or something else?" And I walked to the iron and said, calm as Sunday, "You think you're filming truth. You're filming fear, yours, not mine." Then went back inside while the snow stuck to my boots, because sometimes dignity wins slower, but it still wins. The real twist didn't come from a blog. It came in an envelope on the stone post at dawn, his late wife Julia's handwriting, and a copy of test results that made the room tilt, markers not aligning. Donor egg involved a note that said, "If this reaches you, talk to Lorraine. Don't shut her out." And suddenly all the old ghosts had names. Lorraine Bellamy, the aide who left the week after the funeral. Victor Greaves, the attorney with files that smelled like smoke. A chain of payments through shell companies that spelled out manipulation without ever writing the word. And under all of it, a woman who had been terrified and brave at the same time, trying to protect her child and her husband and herself. You feel that ache in your ribs, right? Eleanor tried to shape the story, like she always had. Was best for the family, which sounds tidy until you're the one paying for tidy. And he stood there, son upstairs, sleeping under a weighted blanket that used to itch and somehow didn't anymore. and realized control had been a god in that house for too long. So he walked past the decanters and into the only room that mattered. The sensory room where the lights are low and beanbags make islands of calm, and he sat cross-legged in a suit that had never sat on a floor and told his boy the hardest truth soft. Your mom loved you so much, she asked for help, a donor that doesn't change anything. I am your dad because I choose you. And Bryce put a toy train in his lap and said 5 words he hadn't said to anyone. You fix broken things, and that was the day a man decided to be a father on purpose, not by paper. We still had to walk the long way through the past, because truth never takes the shortcut. We met with Victor, who confirmed Julia had found discrepancies and was gathering proof before the accident. We saw camera footage of Lorraine near the East Gate at midnight, not wrecking warning. And when Eleanor finally opened the box she'd kept hidden for years, a hospital bracelet with another woman's name, the donors, she said the quiet part out loud. I kept the peace by keeping the truth, and Mr. Moore looked at me like he was asking if he was allowed to feel both betrayal and relief at once. And I told him that's the only way any of this gets better. Both, always both. We drove to meet the donor's sister Victoria in a small town where grief learns to fold its shirts. She had a photo album and a spine and a record of quarterly payments from the family foundation that said, "Please stay quiet," without using a single impolite word. And she told us Julia and her sister had been friends at the clinic, not scandal, just 2 women trying to carry hope across a thin bridge. And she said she didn't want to take anything from anyone. She only wanted to know the boy had been loved. And Mr. Moore nodded the way a man nods when he feels a ledger closing that should never have been opened. Back home, we did what people forget to do. We told the truth where it mattered. And nowhere else he posted a statement, short and human. My family is not a story for speculation. My son is healing. That is the only headline that matters. The board made their little sounds and then went quiet. The groundskeeper lost his job because consequences are also part of love. Security kept Lorraine safe until the Whisper campaign ran out of breath, and Eleanor stood at an upstairs window holding a letter from Julia that said in a hand that didn't shake, "Don't raise him in lies. Let the past end with me." And I watched a woman in pearls finally put down a crown nobody asked her to wear. The ending wasn't loud on purpose, because loud is how we got lost. We set a simple table, roasted chicken carrots that caught the light, a small bowl of apple slices, because Bryce likes to line them up before eating. He sat next to his father without flinching. "He wants you to start," I whispered, and he did one bite, then a mirror, and nobody clapped. We just breathed later. We walked the garden, the snow a memory, and the feeder busy with a red cardinal that looked like a promise you could actually keep. And I told him I don't fix his son, I sit with him while he finds himself. And he said, "Maybe that's what I needed too," which is a good sentence for a man to say when he's ready to stop holding up the ceiling by himself. The last picture I'll give you is small and stubborn Victoria at the gate, with her album kneeling, so he can choose distance or closeness without being pushed. "Bryce, I knew your mom in a very special way." And he touches the page where her sister is laughing in a garden sunlight, catching, and he doesn't speak. He doesn't have to, his body knows, and inside the house for the first time in a long time, nobody is pretending the air doesn't weigh anything. Maybe you think Eleanor was right to protect legacy at any cost. Maybe you think lines between help and family should be iron bars. Maybe you think blood is the only map that matters. Or maybe you've lived long enough to know presence beats perfection, and paper doesn't teach a child to breathe. Say it, I can take it. Drop your take in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me the first time you saw a house learn to tell the truth. And if this hit you in a place that's still tender, like and subscribe so the quiet stories don't get buried. Because sometimes the bravest thing we do is sit on the floor, hum the same two notes, and let the room forgive us.